May it please the court. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mr. Strang, Mr. Buting, Mr. Avery, good morning. On behalf of the state of Wisconsin, let me first start by thanking you for your jury service, thanking you for the attention that you're about to give to this most important case. My name is Ken Kratz. I'm the Calumet County District Attorney. With me prosecuting this case, Tom Fallon, an Assistant Attorney General from the Department of Justice, and Norm Gahn, an Assistant District Attorney from the Milwaukee County DA's office. You will learn that each of us are special prosecutors in this case. The size of this investigation required direction. The investigation required leadership by law enforcement officers that had experience in large investigations. Introducing the two lead investigators, Mark Wiegert from the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, Tom Fassbender from DCI. This is opening statements. Evidence comes in bits and pieces. Therefore, it's nice to have a roadmap or an overview of what the evidence is going to show. If you think of the opening statement as a jigsaw puzzle box, taking all the pieces that are about to be introduced and knowing where all of them go. Many of you jurors in jury selection express concern about the nature of the evidence that's going to be presented. This is a very, very serious crime and potentially has very graphic kinds of details. Let me assure you, as the lead prosecutor, I'm only going to present those pieces of evidence that are necessary. I understand the sensitivities, not only you, but of most of the people seated on the left-hand side of the courtroom. That's the Halbach family. And I want to assure you, members of the jury, that before any piece of evidence is ever introduced in the case, every one of those people on the left side of the courtroom has already seen the evidence. The mother, the father, the brothers, the sisters, the friends, they've all seen the evidence. And so you shouldn't worry about them and what their reactions might be. The judge has told you that there's 4 separate charges and evidence will be presented individually on all 4. However, some evidence may lap over into the other counts. The defendant is charged as a party to the crime. That means if the defendant committed the offense himself, or if the defendant aided and abetted another in the commission of the offense, he can be found guilty. The judge explained to you already what beyond a reasonable doubt means. It's the standard by which we have to prove this case. Let me tell you what it's not. Beyond a reasonable doubt is not beyond all doubt. It's a reasonable doubt, a doubt for which a reason can be given when considering all the evidence. On Monday, October 31st, 2005, beginning at approximately 2:45 p.m., the state of Wisconsin is going to show that the defendant committed murder, that the defendant held the victim against her will, and after the murder, the defendant mutilated her body by burning it in a burn pit behind his garage. What we're not going to prove to you, however, is the why. That's called motive. The reason behind the killing. The state doesn't know the reason behind the killing, and we don't intend to prove that. I'm going to introduce you to somebody. This remarkable young woman was 25 years of age. She was single. She was a freelance photographer. She had her own photography business that was doing quite well. This is Teresa Halbach. We're talking about a real person. We're talking about somebody's daughter, about somebody's sister. Teresa had her whole life in front of her, and the evidence is going to show that on Halloween 2005, that all ended, and it ended at the hands of this defendant, Stephen Avery. Stephen Avery called Auto Trader the morning of October 31st at 8:12 a.m. He identified himself as B. Yonda and had asked for the same woman who had been out there before. Mr. Avery achieved some degree of notoriety back in 2003 when he was exonerated for his 1985 sexual assault conviction. You may already know that the exoneration was based upon DNA evidence. What you may not know is that the testing was performed by the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. The head of the DNA unit, her name is Sherry Culhane. Remember that name as we go through this case. You're going to hear it again. Mr. Avery, as you know, filed a civil lawsuit against Manitowoc County seeking compensation for the unlawful conviction. Stephen Avery was not guilty of the 1985 offense. He should have been exonerated, and he was. But let me tell you, members of the jury, that has absolutely nothing to do with this case. Calumet County began with this case as part of a missing persons investigation. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday, November 5th, Judge Jerome Fox, another judge from Manitowoc County, assigned me to be responsible for the prosecution and to assist in the investigation however I could. This was due to a perceived conflict, an apparent conflict that Manitowoc County had against Mr. Avery, as he had a $36 million lawsuit pending against the county. Please know, members of the jury, that there was no actual conflict. There was nothing that prohibited or precluded individuals from Manitowoc County in assisting in this investigation, and you'll hear they did. Manitowoc County officials remained involved in the case in a support role, especially when it came to seizing evidence and processing the scene. This is the Avery salvage yard. This is the crime scene. There are about 4,000 junk vehicles on the Avery salvage property. There's 4 residences, several outbuildings, and a lot of place for the investigators to search when looking for evidence. You're going to hear that the surrounding properties to the Avery salvage yard was a working gravel quarry. Those places were searched by law enforcement as well. But on Saturday, the 5th of November, Pam and her daughter Nicole Sturm, 2 citizens you will hear, found the victim's SUV. They found the needle in the haystack, and that's how this investigation begins. You're going to hear about attempts that were made to disguise or to hide the SUV on the Avery salvage property where it was located. The vehicle was locked, the license plates were removed, and you'll see that the SUV was found in almost the furthest point possible from the defendant's trailer. You'll see it was parked right near a car crusher. You'll learn why it's important that it was next to the car crusher, and hear about plans that were made to crush this vehicle later in the afternoon on November 5th. Professionals were asked to perform assistance on the case. Law enforcement from the crime lab, expert witnesses, and volunteers all helped. Brutus, a search and rescue dog, also insensitively called a cadaver dog, you'll hear was the first professional, a 4-legged variety, that found evidence on the Avery salvage property. You'll hear that Brutus, when approaching Teresa's vehicle, alerted on the vehicle. It's called hitting on the vehicle. And sadly and unfortunately, that meant one thing. That meant either a deceased individual was in the back of the SUV, or at some point a deceased individual had been in the back of the SUV. Brutus hitting on the vehicle turned this from a missing persons case into a homicide investigation. The crime lab decided to process the vehicle in Madison. You've seen the size of the Avery salvage yard. You should know that Tom Fossbender, the lead investigator, had an idea about how to search this massive crime scene. The methodology, the search plan that he used will be described for you. On the evening of November 5th, officers made very quick work of searching all the residences, all of the outbuildings. They were looking for Teresa. You'll hear that on Saturday the 5th of November, with search warrant in hand, Stephen Avery's residence was searched by law enforcement. The police didn't know what they were looking for yet, but make no mistake. On the first night, they were looking for Teresa, any signs of her being alive or deceased. The next day, Sunday the 6th, volunteer firefighters came to the Avery salvage yard to search all of the vehicles. Every one of those 4,000 vehicles was opened up and checked to see if Teresa was inside. Also on Sunday, November 6th, a firearm was found, recovered hanging over the bed where Stephen Avery slept. This semi-automatic .22 caliber rifle would later be ballistically matched to a bullet having passed through the victim's body. On the 6th of November, officers also recovered a recorded voice message from the 25-year-old Teresa Halbach. On the message, Teresa indicated that she didn't know where she was going and that she needed a call back before she got there. You will learn that the Avery Salvage Yard was the last stop Teresa Halbach made on the 31st of October when taking photographs for her Auto Trader magazine. 2 days into the investigation, the 7th of November, the first results came from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. They found that the blood in the back of the cargo area was female blood, and they also found male blood in at least 6 different places inside the vehicle. It was obvious by then that something horrible had happened to Teresa Halbach. Also on Monday, a burn barrel was discovered. Not just any burn barrel, but the one sitting outside of Stephen Avery's trailer. You'll hear evidence that burned electronics were found inside the burn barrel, positively identified as those having belonged to Teresa Halbach. You'll hear evidence of Teresa's vehicle key being found in the defendant's bedroom. You'll hear about license plates being found crumpled up in a station wagon on the property. And you'll hear about a burn area. The proximity of the burn area to Mr. Avery's trailer is obvious. This was the burn area that contained human remains. They were the human remains of Teresa Halbach. The evidence is going to show that on Wednesday, the 9th of November, officers first started recovering bone fragments from the burn area. They were identified by an anthropologist as being bones from an adult female. You'll hear also that one of the longer bones that was recovered in the burn area still had tissue on it. It was Teresa Halbach's shin bone. Despite Mr. Avery's efforts to completely obliterate all of the bones and all of the evidence by burning it, this bone survived. The tissue on the bone was later matched by DNA evidence to the victim, Teresa Halbach. It's important that we can say with 100% certainty that those human remains are from the victim, Teresa. Finally, as the week wore on, more results came from the crime lab, including the female blood in the cargo area was now matched, belonging to Teresa Halbach. Importantly, the male blood found in 6 different places in the SUV was that of the defendant, Stephen Avery. DNA is a genetic fingerprint, if you will. Our blood has the same DNA as our saliva, as our semen, as our skin cells, as our tissue. It's all the same DNA. You will learn that on the 31st of October, Stephen Avery had a very deep cut to his right middle finger. When looking for the source of active bleeding, that is, how did Stephen Avery's blood get into the SUV, the cut on Avery's finger provides the answer. You're going to hear teeth were recovered from the burn area. One of those teeth, number 31, you will hear from an odontologist, Dr. Don Simley. Dr. Simley matched tooth number 31 to Teresa's dental record. And finally, you're going to hear from the state's anthropologist, Dr. Leslie Eisenberg. Leslie Eisenberg will tell you that she identified all of these little bone fragments in the burn area. She will tell you that the bones are from an adult female and all from one body. Not all evidence deserves equal weight in a case, and 2 particular pieces of bone fragment, pieces of Teresa's skull, you will find had 2 defects caused by a high-velocity projectile. Those defects left what's called lead spray, and you'll therefore hear from our experts that the projectile causing the defect and causing the lead spray were bullets. You will finally hear from Dr. Jeffrey Jensen, medical examiner from Milwaukee County, who will verify the cause and the manner of death. On March 1st and 2nd of 2006, you'll also hear evidence that a second search warrant was executed on Stephen Avery's garage, where 2 bullet fragments were found. One of those bullet fragments was tested by Sherry Culhane. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will also hear from an eyewitness to the case, Bobby Dassey, one of the sons of Barb Dassey, who will tell you that at about 2:45 p.m. on the 31st of October, he saw a young woman, later identified as Teresa Halbach, drive up to the Avery property, exit her vehicle, took pictures of the van, and then Teresa was seen walking towards Stephen Avery's trailer. You'll hear evidence that Bobby thereafter took a shower, and when he left 15 minutes later, Teresa's SUV was still there, but Teresa was nowhere to be found. At the conclusion of the case, when considering all the evidence, I'm going to ask you, members of the jury, members of Manitowoc County, to find the defendant guilty.
Hi, this is John Lee from www.postcrescent.com, reporting from outside the Calumet County Courthouse in Chilton. Special Prosecutor Ken Kratz, the Calumet County District Attorney, has just completed his opening arguments in the Stephen Avery homicide trial. For the first time in the 17 months of this case, prosecutors have divulged that they recovered enough bone fragments from Teresa Halbach's skull to show that her death was caused by at least 2 gunshot wounds to the head. We knew before that Teresa had left her DNA on a bullet fragment in the garage that they found in March in Avery's garage, and that they had found shell casings the first day of their search of that garage. Kratz had talked about the large amount of scientific evidence that is coming from a forensic anthropologist, Dr. Leslie Eisenberg of Madison, and from a forensic dentist who identified teeth found at the scene as belonging to Teresa. He identified those teeth by using dental x-rays. Ken gave about a 1 hour and 45-minute opening statement. We are breaking for lunch now. Dean Strang, Avery's lead attorney, will give his opening statement after 1 o'clock. Soon after that, Kratz will start calling a few witnesses on day 1 of the Stephen Avery trial. We remind you to click on www.postcrescent.com for more information and more current information than you'll find anywhere else. This is John Lee at the Calumet County Courthouse in Chilton. Dean Strang talked for about an hour and a half Monday afternoon. He came right out of the gate pointing the finger at the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department for having the opportunity to plant blood in Teresa Halbach's vehicle, but also having a sloppy, what he considered a tunnel vision investigation into the homicide.
You can call it tunnel vision, you can call it investigative bias, but from that point on, folks, this investigation is about Stephen Avery and not much else. As I think you'll find it to be more likely that that body is burned somewhere else, and bone fragments then are brought to Stephen Avery's burn area, then he's not guilty. We're going to ask you to get it right this time. We're going to ask you to set it right in these cases.
February 12th. Opening statements. I was very anxious to deliver the biggest opening statement in my life. Anxious in the sense of excited, but also very stressed out. I reminded myself that nobody in the world knows this case better than I do, and that everybody, the victim's family, citizens, my supporters, they were all counting on me. My sister-in-law, Kay Lynn, and my in-laws came to watch the opening statements. It was nice to have family support in the courtroom. My 100-minute opening went about as well as I could have hoped. No technology glitches, no real nervous faults, and I delivered it pretty well. With the degree of stress that was involved, I honestly was very pleased with the outcome.